FOSS4G 2023. I hope you are all fresh from last day's gala dinner, having a good party, having nice dancing at the concert, and it's nice to have you all here for the third day of our conference. So it's a pleasure to have our first keynote speaker, and I want to welcome Dan Bourget from UNICEF. He's a geospatial lead at UNICEF, and he came all the way from New York, where is the headquarters of UNICEF. So you had a long way to come here to Prizren. And he will talk about how open source geospatial solution can make a change in his organization and can leverage results for children. So we are welcoming Jan and looking forward for the keynote.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Astrid, and thank you so much to organizers for inviting me to speak on behalf of UNICEF. And it's really a great pleasure and honor to be here and to be able to share our geospatial journey at UNICEF. But before we dive into technical details, data, platforms, frameworks, Python, Django, and other stuff like this, I know we all love it. But before this, let's maybe just take a step back and reflect a little bit about why we do what we do.
Unreasonable. It's how you have to be if you want to change things. Relentless. Tenacious. The world's children need people like that. People who see impossible as incentive to try harder. Who find one good reason to keep going in the face of 1,000 reasons to stop. So, shout out to the hardcore, because big problems need big solutions from big game players. You know the type, the determined, the persistent, the unreasonable. UNICEF, in more than 190 countries and territories, we never give up until the rights of every child are protected. Are you with us? UNICEF, for every child.
So this is really, I think, important to remind ourselves about like the end results and kind of understanding our mission. And at UNICEF, we are really very lucky because our mandate is really very, very clear. We are trying to do our best to advocate for the rights of children all over the world, to make sure that their basic needs are met, to expand their opportunities to reach their full potential. And UNICEF is part of the bigger UN family. And it's really a great pleasure to see that we have other UN agencies present at this conference. We have colleagues from UNDP, from FAO, from UN Geospatial section. So it's really amazing to see that this wider UN family is also gathering here to make sure that we can leverage open source geospatial solutions to work as one UN. But let me ask you a question. How many of you have heard about UNICEF before? Can you raise your hands? Who has heard about UNICEF before? I think everyone. And it's really very empowering and amazing to see UNICEF is really one of the actually strongest brands in the world, and there are strong reasons behind it, because we really make an impact. And just to give you kind of a taste of and understanding of the scale of our operations and scale of our impact, Just a couple of numbers from last year. So in 2022, more than 350 million children under 5 benefited from programs to prevent malnutrition, which were supported by UNICEF. Almost 360 million children all over the world. 78 million children were vaccinated against measles, also just in last year. Or 130 million children received direct cash transfer support through programs supported by UNICEF. So you can imagine we are talking about millions of beneficiaries, millions of children that receives support from UNICEF. And as you can imagine, this comes at a cost. This scale of operations really creates a lot of challenges. UNICEF is operating in 190 countries and territories. We have more than 100 country offices. Obviously this all means that the logistics, the amount of data and systems that we need to have in place to make sure that all our operations are as efficient as possible is really overwhelming. So to be able to deliver this this kind of support at this scale really requires having proper systems, proper solutions to help us, first of all, identify where are children in need. So we need to understand where are the risks, what kind of natural hazards are happening all over the world. What is the flood extent in Pakistan? What are the conflicts? What are the areas of control and front lines in Ukraine? To be able to understand when we can, where we can deliver support, and we need to understand where our support is actually needed. Then we need all the information that is required to be able to actually deliver the support in the field, which means a lot of logistics data. We need to understand what is the spatial accessibility, how to reach to certain destinations, and then finally we need to be able to monitor and plan our programs to understand how actually we are performing and where our support is actually making a difference, what kind of difference we are making. So that's why UNICEF has decided to introduce this corporate geospatial strategy. UNICEF is basically very decentralized organizations and with a long history. We have 76. We've been operating for 76 years now. So as you can imagine, with this scale of operations, this number of country offices and regions where we operate, there's a lot of legacy solutions. All our country offices were deploying their own GIS systems, GIS solutions. They were collecting the data separately, independently. So maybe around 3 years ago, we kind of decided that we need to finally come up with a more coordinated, more centralized geospatial strategy to be able to deploy solutions that would that can be used by all our country offices. So deploying corporate solutions that can be used by all our country offices. And why we have decided to go this way? Well, we really want to make sure that UNICEF's data systems and processes can be geo-enabled, and why we need that? Because we want to transform our data into really easily accessible, readily available, and useful, actionable information to address some key questions like how many children have been affected by flood, where children have limited access to schools and health services, And we need this information, and we need to be able to address these questions very often really quickly, like within hours or days, to support evidence-based decision-making for better results. So we need to make sure that our organization is really data-driven, is knowledge-based, evidence-based organization, and we can plan our programs, our interventions based on the actual evidence and data. So just to give you a quick taste of what kind of use cases for geospatial data and geospatial information, geospatial analysis we have. This is an example of a project we did 2 years ago, I think. It was the first attempt to analyze the impact of climate change, different climate risks on children specifically. And we have produced this report which was, I would say, purely based on geospatial analysis. So we have collected more than 50 different variables together to analyze and measure the risk across 160 countries. And actually the backbone for this report was GIS data and GIS analysis. And this report really, this is an example of one of our kind of objectives, or one of our responsibilities is to advocate for children. And this kind of reports really have huge impact. So when this report was published, we received almost 4,000 online and print media mentions within the couple of days, all over the world, from all over the world. As you can see here, from such media as BBC or you know, you can see from China, from Germany and other countries. These reports they have a huge impact in terms of advocacy. However, this is just one part of our work. Advocacy is not our end goal, right? I mean, we want to make a difference in the field. So we are using also GIS for analyzing and monitoring our response. This is an example from Ukraine, where we try to monitor where our support is being delivered. So we see a number of unique beneficiaries in different areas of the country, analyzed and visualized on the map. We also use and implement various different techniques, and we use different data sets. This is an example of collaboration with other UN agencies, UNOCC, in this case, where we partnered together, and we use satellite data and AI algorithms to extract and identify damaged buildings, to understand the impact of war in Ukraine on schools, wash facilities, and other types of critical infrastructure. And here is another example from Ukraine. So, in addition to using sophisticated techniques like satellite imagery and AI algorithms, in addition to that, I would say in probably the majority of the use cases for mapping data at UNICEF is actually very, very basic. This is an example of a list of UNICEF interventions and humanitarian assistance provided by UNICEF. As you can see, this is an Excel file where every single item that is delivered is geolocated using oblast regions and other like district level codes. And many of our users really struggle with being able to map this kind of information, create maps like this that shows how many people we were able to reach, where are our beneficiaries, how it relates to the active conflict areas, armed conflict incidents, and so on. So as you can see here, these are just a few examples from different projects that were happening in UNICEF within the last year or so. This is an example, again, from Ukraine, where we have the areas of control that we were monitoring on a daily basis, and then trying to understand which UNICEF offices have to be closed, in which areas we can still operate, and like trying to bring different data sets from different sources together to have a better understanding of the situation. But all these map layers, points, lines, polygons, raster data, or color-coded polygons on the map, they actually represent real world, right? So these points on the map may actually represent damaged buildings. Red color on the map may indicate a large number of internally displaced people, which means families suffering, but on the other hand, some blue areas on the map could actually mean that we are delivering some real support for people on the ground. So it's always good to understand that what we map is actually the real world, and in this case, it very often means individual people. But I would say, and probably as you have seen based on these couple of examples, we had quite a range of different tools that we've been using to map the data. Some of our users are using BI solutions. Many other country offices are using commercial solutions. And we try to kind of understand what are the main challenges in terms of mapping spatial data and analyzing spatial data. And I would say one of the biggest challenge for us is to really be able to integrate data from multiple data sources. And something that might actually be quite surprising to many of you, but mapping data at the subnational level, being able to integrate data from multiple sources and present the data at the district or province level very often is really like a huge challenge. And I will explain maybe a little more in details why this is a challenge. But in addition to that, we have not all our country offices have GIS specialists. Not all country offices have access to specialized software licenses, and finally, we also need to make sure that our products, all those great static maps, interactive maps, and dashboards, they actually are used for decision support, so that they can make sure that our decisions, our programs are targeting people in need as efficiently as possible. And we did a kind of a quick assessment of tools, various tools that our users are using most often, and we try to group them into like three main categories. Data portals. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with HDX, Humanitarian Data Exchange Portal, but with this kind of platform, users can easily find the data that they need, but still they need to download the data, analyze, visualize the data. They need to have special GIS skills and also special software and licenses. So there's a long way to go for users to before they can actually have this information really at hand and available for decision making. On the other hand, we've seen a lot of users producing very complex online maps with tens or hundreds of layers. Well, this is great, but really when you start turning on and off these layers, at some point this kind of products are actually not really very useful for decision making. This visual overlay maybe difficult to read. There's no quantitative outputs. So this approach also has a lot of limitations. BI solutions, on the other hand, and we have some corporate Microsoft BI tools that are used in the organization. Very often they have very limited mapping capabilities. It's difficult for us to create maps at the subnational level. The default boundaries provided by those tools are not always UN compliant, and mapping data at the subnational level by using names is really very difficult. So we came up with this, based on the analysis of the situation, the use cases, we came up with this hybrid geospatial architecture at UNICEF, where we have two components. One is based on S3 solutions, and the second pillar is open source. And in addition to this, like a foundational foundational geospatial infrastructure, we also identified two main areas where our users still do not have proper tools available, and we a little bit more than a year ago, we started working on these two dedicated platforms called GeoRepo and Geosite, which are purely based on open source solutions. And I will now just briefly go through this and explain and show you what these two platforms do. In short, GeoRepo is going to be our main, like a single source of truth for subnational administrative boundaries. And I will explain in a second why this is so important. GeoRepo will be serving those reference boundaries to Geosite, which will be able to, where users can easily map the indicator data using those commonly agreed set of boundaries. In addition to that, we still have this and maintain this ArcGIS environment where users can upload any geospatial layers like roads, schools, raster layers, and so on. And these layers can also be added to Geosite as context layers. These three building blocks are the main geospatial building blocks, but in addition to that, we try to make sure that this geospatial architecture is kind of connected to the rest of our data landscape. At UNICEF, we have this data warehouse which we use for managing our official indicators. So GeoRepo will be providing the unified code list for our SDMX data warehouse. And SDMX, I don't know if you've heard about it, but this is kind of a standard for sharing statistical data, different indicators. And on the other hand, Geosite has a connector to SDMX data warehouse, so we can use Geosite as a front end for creating maps based on the data warehouse. And obviously, this is just a part of the landscape. We also have other tools, and the whole data collection workflow basically starts with collecting data in the field. So we have we are using ODK tools for collecting data in the field. Then we have a microdata catalog. Final aggregated indicators are pushed to the data warehouse, which then can be used to visualize data in Geosite. We also have some attempts to work with the big data, and we are experimenting with superset, Parquet files kind of approach, but this is kind of R&D phase. So why open source? Well, we believe that open source really helps us in fostering internal collaboration. You may be surprised, but really very often it's difficult to have like a cross-divisional, cross-departmental cooperation with in those kind of organizations. So this open source approach really helps us achieve that. And those two platforms, GeoRepo, Geosite, that we are working on, is actually a great example of collaboration between three different divisions, data and analytics team that I am part of, emergency team, and our IT division. But also, we hope that open source approach will help us establish external collaborations, external partnerships. We hope that this is a way for us to scale up more easily, increase the transparency. UNICEF is part of the Digital Public Goods Alliance, so we really want to make sure that whatever we create is open source and can be used by the rest of the community. And one of the reasons also is to have this flexibility and be able to deliver functionality that is missing in our commercial solutions. And really just a quick tour of these two platforms. The first one, GeoRepo. I don't want to go too much into details, but if anyone of you is really interested in understanding how why using just subnational administrative boundaries is so critical, I would be more than happy to talk more about that. But basically, we need to make sure that we have a system, a single source of truth that can provide us with a versioned, validated set of administrative boundaries with unique identifiers. That's the data that can be accessed through API, using vector tiles for creating online maps. And why it really matters, it's apparently most of our data sets are actually subnational estimates. Indicators related to child poverty, indicators related to vaccinations, health, education, all these indicators are available at the subnational level, meaning we have these estimates calculated for every district, province in many countries. So to be able to map these data, which are the majority of the data that we work with, we need to have a proper set of administrative boundaries. And the problem is that there is no single source of truth. There's no a single global database of administrative boundaries at the higher level, at the actually more granular level, going down to the district or sub-district level. And the fact is that many UN agencies are actually using their own identifiers. So to be able to identify each district in Somalia, we need to have a unique identifier. And every agency is using their own codes, which makes this interoperability very difficult. And we operate in a disconnected environment, meaning that we, as UNICEF, we don't manage administrative boundaries by ourselves, right? We receive this data from different sources, from national mapping agencies and other data providers. So it's very difficult to track changes, to keep this consistency of globally unique identifiers. And because of that, many of our data sets, even internal data sets, are not interoperable, meaning we cannot compare our indicators related to health with indicators related to education, because these two teams were using different sets of administrative boundaries. I see some people are nodding, meaning that you feel the pain, right? It may seem really trivial and very, very basic to many of you, but it's actually a super important challenge for us. Very often our data is geocoded using subnational names, and there are different naming conventions, different spelling, and we need a way to do kind of fuzzy matching to be able to map this data. So quickly, GeoRepo workflow. We start by collecting the data from the best data source available. Hopefully this data is already harmonized and validated. I think we had a great talk earlier, maybe yesterday, by Max, who was talking about edge matching, admin boundary edge matching. So this is also like an important step in making sure that we have a proper set of admin boundaries. And then once the data is uploaded to GeoRepo, GeoRepo will do the validation, versioning, the boundary matching across different versions, will generate unique codes, and will also collect all the external codes that are available in the shapefile. So at the end, GeoRepo will also provide this data through API and will generate vector tiles. So we have a single source of truth, and our plan is to make sure that all our internal systems are using the data from this source. And so this is just a few screenshots. We have a user interface for defining the simplification levels for tiling configuration. We use Tegola for creating vector tiles. We have a step-by-step wizards to download, to upload the data to the system, provide the field mapping, provide different fields with different labels in different languages. We have error reports where users can validate the data. And also this final step where we do the matching of boundaries across time, which helps us make sure that we have this lineage and historical reference. And GeoRepo has a API for users to access the data easily. And finally, so GeoRepo is just the first step, very foundational. It's nothing really super cool in terms of the user interface, but it's very foundational. And it's really like the first step that is needed to be able to map data efficiently later on. And this last step is visualizing the data and analyzing the data on the map. And for this, we have developed an application called Geosite. And I would call it like a geospatial BI solution, which tries to bring and bridge the functional gaps between commercial solutions like ArcGIS Online and also BI tools that we use in the organization to make sure that we have more analytical capabilities, but also strong cartographic and mapping functions. And there is a basic principle behind the Geosite, so we try to make sure that we transform all input data sets, that may be points, lines, polygons, raster data, into a set of indicators calculated using the same set of administrative boundaries. So for points, we can do the aggregation, like count number of armed conflict events. For raster data, we can do zonal statistics. And for tabular data, which is still one of the most common formats that we use in UNICEF, we can join this data using unique identifiers provided by GeoRepo. So at the end, we end up having this large number of indicators where users can easily visualize them and analyze. The idea is that different internal and external systems and data sources can be integrated into Geosite as a set of indicators readily available for users. And we have a data harvesting module that pulls data from different sources, puts them into the database. Users have interactive, can build their own interactive dashboards, but data can also be exposed to other systems for other purposes. So again, the idea is that GeoRepo serves the boundaries. In Geosite, we don't store any geometry, we don't store any boundaries, but we use vector tiles from GeoRepo, combine the data, indicator data in Geosite, and provide this this interface. So really very quickly, just a couple of slides to show you the capabilities. It's very easy for our users to switch between different indicator layers, switch between admin levels. This was also one of the challenges that we had to visualize the data at the district or province level. We have this time slider, so users can easily navigate across time and visualize the same indicator over time. Users can use different visualization methods. Also, what's interesting, and it's kind of a BI functionality, users can create dynamic layers based on one-to-many relational tables, let's say. So let's say that we have a table with a list of interventions, and then we want to dynamically aggregate the data. So let's say we would like to see how many beneficiaries we were able to reach in the WASH, health, or education sector. So we can provide users with these slicers where users can easily filter what data they are interested in. on top of indicator layers, users can overlay any additional context layers that are pulled from external sources like ArcGIS or GeoNode. We have different capabilities for comparing indicators. And finally, what's, I would say, most important, I think, is the ability to create filters. So users can really address the questions. You remember the question, how many children live in districts which are prone to flood, which are also with low access to health services and so on. So we can build this query, we can transform these user questions into the set of filters, and we can finally see which districts to prioritize, and this way we can identify the areas of interest for us to operate. We have some 3D visualizations, we can create spatial bookmarks, and users can download the data in Excel and GeoJSON formats. There is a quite advanced backend administration, so this is like a self-service generic data platform. Users can create their own things, they can share things internally, so we are trying to break these silos. Things can be shared with anyone in the organization. And really, I've already mentioned those key benefits. What's important, I mean, these two platforms are open source. Here are the links to our GitHub repositories. The backend is PostGIS database. We are using Django and React for the front end. MapLibre is our main mapping library. We've been experimenting with different libraries. I've mentioned we use Tegola for creating vector tiles. And I would like to thank our team. I think we have Gavin on the stage, Gavin Fleming, and Tim Sutton, who is not here today, but this is the team that was helping us build those amazing two products. So thank you again for your amazing support and helping us navigate through this open source geospatial landscape. We have lots of ideas for future improvements. We want to improve the UI, we want to add new features and build partnerships and community around those tools. So if you would like to get involved, there are multiple ways. You can help us test the platform, you can join our GitHub repo and help us develop the platform. If you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, feel free to reach out to us. If you have some new features that you would like to build and create by yourself for your own use cases, that's also an option. And really, you know, we are looking forward to your ideas, suggestions, how to build a community around those tools, and let our know about these platforms, because we really believe that they can be useful for our organizations as well. So just to wrap up, really believe that open source gives us this flexibility and cost-effective scalability. And even maybe more importantly, it creates real opportunities for collaboration. And I mean it, 2 weeks ago, more or less, I was presenting and we had a meeting in Nairobi with different UN agencies and geospatial focal points from different UN agencies. And really this open source approach can help us work together really more effectively. And finally, I believe that this geospatial approach is really a key enabler that will help us leave no one behind, which is our mission and goal. So I hope you are with us, and thank you so much.
So thank you, Jan, for the great presentation. It was very impressive to see what's going on at UNICEF, and it was very nice that you added the GitHub link and everything is open source, so I guess it's really interesting for other organizations as well. So we don't have time for questions, but Jan is around, so if you want to contact him and discuss with him, you are welcome to approach and get connected. So thanks again, Jan, for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
So now it's time for the coffee break, and then hopefully you all enjoy the third day of talks here at FOSS4G.